for being here with us today for this panel. And public interest indeed is a theme that has been present not only in the IGF but in many other internet governance and internet policy events. One example, for instance, of public interest, a way of viewing public interest are the so-called public interest commitments. So when there is something to be, when there is a commitment to perform a certain mission or a certain task in relation to something obtained, like the ability to provide a certain service. So in our panel today, we have Olivier Capone-Blanc, former ELA chair and chair of the RALO, and Sébastien Bachelet, former board member for ICANN, Glenn McKnight, Board of Trustees, Internet Society. I'll be moderating the session, so I'll be mainly fielding your questions to our presenters. And let's listen then to our first speaker. I'll go via the order here in the slides. Olivier, could you start?
Yes, thank you. Hello? It's on. It's on.
And now, with the green light, it is on. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Renate, for this introduction. I've been involved with the public interest in ICANN's remit for a while. As the chair of Uralo, our star in at large regarding the public interest is a gentleman called Wolf Ludwig, the previous chair, who has worked on this topic for quite a few years. And so we've had several sessions that were set up in ICANN to discuss the public interest. And I took a few concepts from one of his past papers, so I can't claim any credit for the content of what I'm about to sort of provide you with on the background of the public interest. I'll be very brief, actually, just picking a couple of things. First, the concept of the public interest itself has been around for a very long time. It's not something new in ancient, in Greek history. So looking at the antique, Aristotle looked at the concept of polis, and its goal, and it was not polis as in the police, but polis, the Greek word, and its goal as the happiness of the citizens. A Roman equivalent to this concept evolved around the term civitas. And so when tracing the public interest, it becomes clear that the concept has been around not only from then, but until now. So if you bridge in between those ancient times and more recently, in the times in the Age of Enlightenment in Europe in the 18th century, you'd find out that the concept of public interest was something that rated very highly in the goals of the different people that were involved around that time. There are several countries whose constitution is based on the public interest. You can look at the French Constitution, the Swiss Constitution, and even articles in the Spanish Constitution, all dating between, well, the Swiss 1874, France 1958, the Spanish Constitution is the latest one from 1978. So it's not something that is being invented when one looks at ICANN. In ICANN, Uralo has been very much interested in looking at this and in trying to promote it. But it's not something that it's taken out of a hat and decided to push forward with, because ICANN guiding principles are actually rooted in the public interest. There are two defining factors in ICANN, in what ICANN does. The first one is what everyone always refers to, the bylaws. The ICANN bylaws have the global public interest being referenced a total of 10 times. So it's not that it's not going to do anything about the public interest. It has to. It's in the bylaws. But more importantly, actually, when ICANN was created, it was created as a public benefit, not-for-profit organization. And that kind of classification in the US system actually has to put ICANN, makes ICANN a special type of vehicle, if you want. It has to act in a certain way, it has to act responsibly, and it has to act for the public benefit, the public good. So taking these two into account to start with, ICANN has worked over years, and one of the big changes, I think, in the new generic top-level domain, or the latest generic top-level domain round of domain applications, was that there was a section which, funnily enough, is actually called Public Interest Commitments, the PICs. And that section in the contract actually referred to the use of the top-level domain. Now, that's something which is a little bit different from, and the use and the sort of implementation of it, that's something that's a bit different from ICANN looking at things in a strict manner. And this is where there's a bit of a discussion in ICANN. ICANN doesn't deal with content, they just deal with the domains themselves, but not the content, not the way that the domains are being used. And yet the public interest commitments, which have a mandatory part that is contractual, that basically says we're not going to be running the domain in a criminal way or a way like this, very generic, very general. There's also another part which also shows if, for example, it is a sensitive domain like .doctor, let's take. .doctor could be misused. So domain names under .doctor could be misused. It has a higher incidence of potential misuse. And the Government Advisory Committee did point this out for a number of domains. As a result, some of the applicants for these top-level domains have made further commitments and said we will only sell doctor domains to actual certified medics or people that can prove that they are actually a doctor. So this is just an example. .bank would be another example. But that so far has been the way that the public interest has been looked at in a contractual way. There is a debate at ICANN whether the public interest should actually be defined in ICANN and whether specific action should be taken under the public interest. I think the view in at large, and maybe I might let Sébastien also say a few words about this, and Glenn, because we're all from the at-large community. The view that I've seen in at-large is that we do want something to go a bit further than what we have at the moment. The view in some other communities in ICANN is that there isn't a need to define the public interest. There isn't a need to step out and say, well, we're going to act specifically in the public interest in all of the decisions that we make, because in the way that we roll out whatever new domains or whatever program takes place in ICANN, we already act like this. So if you act in the public interest, you don't need to define the public interest. That should get you thinking. And I think I'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. I'm just going to quickly continue the round of presentation for our panelists, and I'll ask now Sébastien to bring his views.
Thank you very much, Renata. I just discovered this morning that I was supposed to talk about this topic. But if I take the introduction of Olivier, and I know that police, it's not the same as police, but now I am wondering why, now I know why yesterday the 4 groups decide that we can cut internet. It's because you think that public interest is the police interest. And I was really shocked by the feedback from each group saying that either you are from the civil society, the business, the government, and was the fourth one, the technical community, I guess. Everybody agrees that we can cut internet. Then I will stop here because I am not allowed to speak anymore.
Okay, no, You brought this on yourselves. So thank you, Sebastian. And Glenn McKnight, could you please share your view?
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm on the other side of the camera this time. Normally, I'm on the other side. Okay, so there's two hats I wear. I'm the counterpart to Olivier's role in civil society at large. I'm the chair for Norello. But I'm going to talk to you about my role as board member, trustee with the Internet Society. Just a little bit of background first before I talk about our perspective. Is a number of years ago, we had one chapter in Canada called ISOC Quebec. And we approached ISOC and said, we'd like to have another chapter and we'd like to have ISOC Canada. And so needless to say, that was something, and there is national chapters, and they were very much against it because they said, wow, why don't you take ISOC Toronto, ISOC Ontario, ISOC Justin Bieber. Actually, it was our suggestion. They didn't take it very well. And we said, well, okay. And there were very strong reasons that they had to not do it because it was fundamentally you had this presence based on a largely Francophone organization based out of Quebec. And it turns out that there was a lot of endorsement from the Quebec chapter. And basically, the Quebec chapter operates in French, and we operate in English. And there's people that are in the rest of Canada that has joined ISOC Quebec, and people in Montreal and elsewhere that joined us. So it's worked out, but there was a lot of fear and trepidation in terms of us moving forward. So we were committed to the idea of looking at creating a viable source to speak on internet issues in Canada, because the Quebec chapter was not approaching the federal government on what the strategies were. And we have a number of issues, just like yourself. One is obviously internet shutdown, but it hasn't happened in our elections, but it is an issue. The government has that potential power. But we also were looking at things that affect Canadians, and our communication branch, Industry Canada, is responsible for, similar to the FCC in the US. We looked at broadband issues, and one of the things that came forward is that broadband was a human right, and that there was going to be a commitment to providing high-speed internet to anyone in Canada, just like clean water, access to the courts in either language, French or English, basic human rights in terms of the commitment. And which is a very interesting idea, a very lofty idea, but the reality is, if you know Canada, we all virtually live about 100 miles from the US border. Not that we love Americans, but it's just the way the history has done it. And obviously there's some development away from the border, such as the oil fields in Alberta and elsewhere, but largely 90% of the population is fairly close. So when you have density, and you all know about density, you can really build capacity. So that's going to be an extreme challenge in commitment for the public interest to the communities such as native or far north communities, because to get access to the internet, you can get it, but it's going to cost you a lot. So there's unevenness in the process. So that's one thing that a chapter that's national in scope can approach the minister, the policies with the CRTC, and say, okay, these are a number of issues that are really important to us as Canadians. Not to say that the Internet Society members, which are also members of ISOC as well, aren't committed to the global commitments. Now, as we've talked, and we're going to have a presentation today by the manager of this region with ISOC today. There's some numbers are talking 100,000, 120,000 members. It doesn't cost you anything to become a member. In our concept, just like Germany, I don't know about, I'm pretty sure not in your case, but we have a concept that we charged. We have an admission fee, an annual membership fee, and the idea was we wanted to have people, as the American expression, put your money where your mouth is. So we wanted people to say, if you believe in this, you financially support it. Now, do we represent all Canadians? That'd be crazy to think that. But we do have a committed group, and this is the importance for this group here. All of you are pathfinders, all of you are going to make a difference, and Margaret Mead said it best, don't underestimate the power of a determined small group of people. So all of you are determined, and I remember the lady back here yesterday and definitely taking the panelists to task, and that spirit is really necessary, and it's in your blood, it's in your DNA to fight tyranny. And we have a vision for ISOC. It's called the Internet for Everyone, and again, that's the lofty commitment, but in reality is we have to strive for the lofty goals. We have to commit ourselves to these goals that maybe it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to put into policy. It's going to be tough. How are you going to put financial commitment to it? But we as ISOC members and ISOC trustees, we feel that we can make a difference, and we want to speak out on issues that are affecting every single person. And one of the ways we are putting policy into action, and sorry, just show of hands, how many people are ISOC members? Wow. We should have had a picture there. That was a Kodak moment. That's fantastic. And many of you are not only ISOC members, you're also committed to your own chapters, and I believe we're talking 4 chapters in India. So what we have is, and I don't want to take any thunder from the speaker, that's a little bit later, but we have a Beyond the Net program, and it's a small amount of money, but it's again, looking to communities and saying to your chapters, how can we help you? And there's obvious issues that we take a real serious issue on, is the gender equity issue. That's a serious digital divide. And our commitment with our president, Kathy Brown, she's extremely sensitive to women's issues and women's access. So you have a very sympathetic ear within the board as well as staff on that issue. But there's a host of other issues, and there was a fantastic paper we launched, and I believe I was talking to a number of people that did the Intercommunities 2017, and you guys had we did the rotation because we had the 25th anniversary. I was the lucky one to be at 3 o'clock in the morning in Turkish, so I was up there. So you guys were reasonable time because it started in California, a couple of weeks ago. But I think that's about it. I'll if I think of something else, I'll come back.
Thank you, Glenn. I will just get back to one of the hats that Glenn wore so well, which is the regional view. And I will also try and get my regional hat, and speak a little bit more about this. Shahul, can we show the URL? So I'm actually coming from a house, so a festival. Can you refresh it? I'm coming from Mozilla House last week. I was in a Mozilla festival, so it's like a self-organized, completely decentralized event where people bring their projects on openness and culture, digital culture, and it's supported by the Mozilla Foundation. But we also try to really do projects that bring something good for a region or for a group, right? And so this is the project I am showing there. It's on GitHub. It's called Voices of the Amazon. And we are building a digital collective in the Amazon. So one of the things that we first realized when we started this project is that many people really don't know what the Amazon is. So this map there gives you quite an idea of this region, which is 9 countries. And so this is our, in the green, you have what Greenpeace considers, sorry, in the yellow you have what Greenpeace considers our Pan-Amazon line. So this is our, sorry, again. In the yellow, you have the Pan-Amazon line, which is our agreement, our geopolitical agreement of the 9 countries that form the Amazon. On the green, you have what Brazil considers to be the climate of the Amazon. And on the red line, I think it's very faint for you to see it from there, but it's the legal limits of the Amazon. So you basically have free borders. Free borders between 9 countries, several states. So it's a completely cross-border area. And not only cross-border, but most of these borders, as you see, for example, the border between Amazon and Pará is a straight line. Someone actually one day drew a straight line and said, okay, this is the border. There's no way of knowing. Many times when you are in these regions, there's no way of knowing where you are, which state you are, which country you are. So it's completely a way of thinking, new way of thinking about countries and locations and languages and cultures. So in between those borders, this is the end of the Portuguese Latin America and the beginning of the Hispanic Latin America. What you actually have there, though, is 100 or so indigenous languages that got mixed with the local language. So you're not speaking either Portuguese or Spanish. You're speaking a third language, which is completely different. And so this is the project we have about the digital collective in the Amazon. And one of the things that brought us together recently was the aftermath of a long, long story in Nikon, which we aren't in that. We are not following or not involved in that. But it's specifically because we're not involved in that, this brought us together. So there was a statement drawn by people of these 9 countries. So mainly, and one of the interesting things, we talk a lot via mobile messaging. So when you take, like, I have a student, so I teach here in Pará, right, the first state. I have a student, she comes from the border of Amazon and Peru. She takes a 3 days ride to go to my class. She leaves on, I think Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is my class, and then she comes back, she takes canoe, she takes boats, bus. So this student of mine, 6 days a week she's on a boat. So mainly what we do is we talk via WhatsApp. She does her all her exercises with her students via WhatsApp. So people started talking. When they saw that people were talking about the region, they started talking. And one of the things that really hit us was like, do we exist? Because everybody's talking about us, but nobody's really talking to us. So they got together and they have written this statement. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it. So, in light of the twists in the process of the new GTA of the Amazon, many parties have come forward speaking for the benefit of the people of Amazon and staking their claim that they were doing what is best for region development. Not once during all this time anyone cared to ask what our thoughts are or what we think the best for our region is. Well, we would like to ask all parties to stop talking about us as if we can speak for ourselves. It must not be forgotten that the Amazon region involves the population of 9 South American nation states. For us, this is a time of challenges over the Amazon, such as illegal mining, deforestation, water pollution, among others. Any policy decision about the region or its name in any language is a matter of great interest for all of us, and we cannot be left aside. So this is just the beginning of the statement, and of course, can you imagine trying to talk to a region like this? It must not be easy. But at the same time, the statement goes on to say, governments come forward and say, I'm speaking in your public interest. I'm speaking on behalf of you. Companies come and say, no, I have a great idea, and it's for you. But nobody really asked you. So it was quite an interesting event. It was sort of a cathartic event that these people came together and decided, hey, let's just make the point that we exist. So sometimes what is in the public interest, or was take to be in the public interest, doesn't really count with the public or with the people who are behind that interest. And actually, what the funny thing was that when we started to research this theme, this story, and so on, we actually received a memo that said it's really interesting to talk about the Amazon region because it's the vast area, empty, full of exotic ideas. And you're like, okay, so we're empty. So that was another point which made us quite interested to assert our own existence. So it's not an empty area. There are people there. There are people attempting to communicate. So this is where this project came to light, the idea of a digital collective, to show what we work on and what we do. And what it really is in our interest, because we realized that everybody was talking about it but us. But I'll just pass on to our panelists. Can we move back to the names? So to complete this idea.
Keep the map. I would like to say a few things about this map. Sorry, because Renata, if you allow me, I guess it's difficult from here to understand all the trick of this region, because it's a tropical forest, and on the side of the Peru, it's the Andes. That's been a very, very big mountain, like you have Himalaya, you have the Andes here, and that's a real. It's not the border of Peru, but it's in middle of Peru, and it's a physical border. It's very difficult to go from one side to the other, and there are very few roads. You may imagine that there are plenty of roads here, but no, there are a lot of river and so on, and that's difficult to go from one place to another. Or difficult. You can't take your car and go from Brazil to Peru even in 4 days. It's take much more time. That's why also this region it's important. But we have also to understand that when we talk about people here, the decision from some government in the other side of the country can be very detrimental also for the people living there. They want to add a road or cut trees, and that's a real problem for the people living there. But it's also a problem for the health of the world in the future, because it's one of the place where forest is important for the atmosphere and for the temperature in the future. But what is important, why Renata is talking about that, it's because there is one company named Amazon that maybe you know, that bring stuff from a provider to you, in many places of the world, and the name of the company is Amazon. And in the time where it was open for application, ICANN received an application for .amazon, and they were thinking, and I can understand that it's their name, and they can apply for their name to be on the root server, on the root file, as other company names or brand TLDs we got from other company. But the fact is that this name is also the name of one part of the world, but it's not geographically a name that was reserved in the process, what we call the application guidebook. It's why after 5 years ICANN is still under discussion on that topic, and it's going back and forth between the government of the region and the Amazon company, and between the board and part of the community on that issue. It was just to let you know, to understand a little bit more why we are in this situation today and why it's so important to find a solution, because if we talk about public interest, is it one of the businesses who serve a lot of clients, or is it the one of living in the region, or the government of the country of the region? It's at least a question we need to be open to discuss. Now I understand that both parties think that they are right, and how we can find a consensus on that, it will be difficult, but I guess ICANN will try.
Can I say a few words?
Yeah, sure.
So on this topic, Amazon, I mean, that's one of these big topics that's likely to last for several ICANN meetings. It's already been really at the forefront of discussions. And people think, oh, so you're going to be 7 days in the next ICANN meeting. What do you people talk about? Well, there'll be at least 3 hours or more. 3 hours in one session and probably hours in other sessions about this, because it's one of these cases where, and it's often the case at ICANN, you have two different points of view, and it's very difficult to choose between one and the other because each side makes a very valid point. Amazon makes the point that if they can have .amazon, they can be more, well, they serve millions of customers worldwide, they can be more easily identified, and therefore that could reduce the risk of fraud, etc., and they better serve their customers. And so they are basically saying, if we do that, if we have .amazon, that will be for the public interest. Of course, the people of the Amazonian region are saying, well, wait a minute, this is our land, this is the name for our area, and this is the public. These are the people that actually, they say they have the right to this. So then there is a discussion that then goes into saying, well, what right is stronger than the other right? Each one asserting the right in a certain sense. Amazon is saying that they've registered the name Amazon as a trademark, but the Amazon region has not registered Amazon as a trademark. But the Amazon region is following the list of country geographic names, etc. We're looking here more at sovereignty and UN processes that define regions of the world and territories of the world. So which ones of the two have precedence over the other? This has never come about in anything, because when allocating a trademark, there is this thing of saying, well, the trademark is for a specific type of service. So Amazon would have the trademark for selling books and CDs and now pretty much anything else. But it would be a trademark for specific activities. When you then go for a top-level domain, you don't register a top-level domain. Remember I mentioned to you earlier, ICANN doesn't deal with content. So a top-level domain is going to be registered for any activity. ICANN's not going to decide on what activity you're allowed to perform under that top-level domain. So you're effectively giving perpetual rights to a string, to a name, to an applicant, whether it's a company, an individual, a country, or any other type of entity. And that's a real difficult thing to grapple with. Who do you agree with? And of course, because ICANN is bottom up, ideally, it should be for the community to be able to decide. But ultimately, it will have to be for the board to make a judgment based on what the community tells it to do. Now, it's easy for the ICANN board to make a judgment call when there's consensus in the room and everybody's saying, yeah, do this, and then the board just follows through. But in those situations when there's a split community, and especially a split community between governments on the one hand that are saying they're representing their people and they're representing the will of their people, they're democratically elected governments, and on the other side, commercial interests that have followed the whole process and that have gone through all the hurdles and said, well, we've got trademark, we've got all of that, we've followed all the rules. What do you do? Which side do you lean on? And so this is one of the things where the public interest is actually right at the center of ICANN. And there are two views of the public interest: acting in the public interest by best serving customers, millions of people worldwide, or acting in the best interest, in the public interest for defending the rights of people in an area.
How many are you members of the Internet Governance Hub on Facebook? Anybody here? Okay, I posted an article from Circle ID last night on this issue. So it doesn't cost anything to join the group. We have a number of, one of the curators is at the back of the room. There's about 4 of us. You're a curator too, right? Yeah, there's about 4 or 5 of us, and so we approve people, but there's a great article from Circle ID that's summarizing this issue.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just note, oh, sorry. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So I'll just note that we are, of course, doing here rounds of comments on public interest related topics. But I guess we can also, since we have 20 minutes only, we can also take questions from you. So anytime if you want to make a question or a comment now would be a good time, or feel free also to interrupt our panelists. Oh, we have 1, 2, yeah. Let's get the one on the back.
Thank you. Actually, Sebastian mentioned about the decision of the community yesterday, the role play. Ola agrees in partial internet shutdown. But actually, we are conditioned in that way because everything is in the name of national security. Everything is come in the name of national security. If we say no internet shutdown, people will say, then what will you do in a national security issue? And we all are conditioned. I mean, we cannot sympathetic to other people because, for example, there is people are fled from Myanmar, Rohingya, and they are seeking asylum in our country, and we are saying no. I mean, not the government saying no because this is threat to national security. So I wonder how. I mean, this is a global issue. I think in your country also this kind of things will arise, and I wonder how this community, this inter-governance community, resists this kind of action from government, and that's the question.
I guess the main reason why we are here is that because we want to bring together the voice of each and every stakeholder, and it's in talking together that I hope that we can find a way to go forward and not to have just one saying, I am the boss and I decide here. But at the end of the day, since it is a case from years, I will give you one little story. When I arrived first at ICANN a long time ago, it was in 2001, my first meeting. Sorry for that. I didn't know anything about ICANN, and I jumped in, and I met with the other people from France who were participating to the meeting. And I met with a representative of the government, and they told me, why you are here? We are elected, we are the voice of the citizen of the country, you don't need to be here. Then I met representative of the CCTLD, and they told me, why you are here? We are a multi-stakeholder organization, you can participate to the French registry, and we can talk on your behalf, and you don't need to be here. Then I met businesses, and they say, you are my customer, then why you are here? You don't need, I can talk on your behalf. It's one of the reasons, because all those people were saying that I have not my space in ICANN, and in more generally speaking in internet governance, that I stick to participate and I want to have a voice. And I really don't appreciate when anyone says that I am talking on your behalf. No, I am talking on my own behalf, and I hope that every one of you will talk on their behalf. Then we need to gather the voice of end user. And it's why we have an organization. In 2001, there was no such organization within ICANN. Now we have at large, and I like, even if it's difficult to manage this very complicated part of the organization, it's still better than not to have any voice. And the end user voice, it's important. And I hope that in participating, we can avoid this way of the one saying that we don't want to hear from you.
Thanks, Sebastian. Hello? Thanks, Sebastian. And we have another one here. Do we have other questions? Okay, let's go over here.
Hi, good morning to all. So the panel represents a variety of organizations here, the ISOC, the ICANN, the IGF. It would be great if you can, just make us a bit aware about the accountability mechanisms at each of these organizations, because you represent, say, the global public interest on internet. So what are the accountability mechanisms, undertaken by each of these organizations? So that would be helpful.
So I'm gonna start here from Gandon.
Yeah, the commitments of ISOC, well, obviously we are limited based on budget as well as area of focus, but our strategic plan, and it keeps evolving as any organization, is to reach out and work with the communities that are disconnected. But let me share with you what we have done with the internet inclusion with IEEE. Back in 2009, we got together, and that is the IEEE Foundation and the UN Foundation, to look at the SDG goals. Remember, there was a graphic up a couple of days ago. And the internet connectivity was not highest on the list. Obviously, food and clean water and health and education is much higher, but it is a mechanism. It's an extremely important mechanism. If we provide internet access to communities, there's a definite connection to the growth in the GDP, and there's a commitment. So what we did with the combination of the two foundations, we had struck a committee between technical community and a not-for-profit community, people who have boots on the ground trying to make a difference. And so we had a commitment on three things of the 32 goals. One was reliable electricity, two is internet connectivity, and the third was patient records or individual records. The unfortunate thing after we conceptualized how to do the problem is we ran into a little issue in Haiti, which was called an earthquake. So the UN Foundation funds left the commitment to do community of practice of these 3 best practices. One kilowatt, 1 kilowatt system, small scale electrical kiosks in villages to provide power. Then you can charge your cell phone, and and then you can power up a mesh network, and you can do a number of things. But if you don't have reliable power, you're dead in the water. A recent survey in Africa, 27 out of the 29 community networks that were rolled out by a number of well-meaning not-for-profits and government were not functioning because it all came down to a lack of reliable power. So in terms of our commitment with IEEE Smart Villages, and I think I sent you guys a pamphlet about that, and our commitment with IEEE Site is very strong, dealing with that fundamental issue. How do we provide low-cost, community-based power? And if you have that, you can do the next stages, whether it's internet access, lighting for security, and protecting of women and children, and the whole aspect of it. So where is our commitment? IEEE has committed through the HAC, the Humanitarian Activities Committee, which I believe, Satish, you were on that committee in the past. We have a commitment with funding and bilateral supports and the US aid and other groups to actually see how we can work. And there's a number of projects in India that are very, very small scale, because remember, the billion people who are not connected to the grid will never be connected to the grid. Their power is not there. We cannot solve all the electrical problems, which means internet access as well. We can, there's limited funds that we can do.
Thank you, Glenn. Olivia, would you like to answer?
Can you keep this question for later? Because in the next session, we will try to talk about the IANA transition and what we have done about accountability for ICANN. Thank you.
I will just make a note. So here, this Amazon work that we did, the statement. So this is a regional thing. So this is a work by people from the region. Yes, I do have a role as a MAG member in the IGF, but there is no such a thing, for instance, as a group about indigenous communities and internet governance in the IGF. ICANN is in this debate for a real long time now about the delegation of the .amazon new to TLD, and there are a number of aspects, quoting public interest committee commitments that have been in discussion, and they bring other themes to themselves, like the issue of multilingualism. And I think when you talk about being accountable, there are 2 things. You talk about accountability of an organization, which is what you asked. So, and Sebastian pointed out very well how that this is a process, and the IANA transition was a moment that this process not only began but matured to depths that are very interesting. But I think another thing is being accountable to a community or to a region. So when we talk about relating to your community or to your region, you have to listen to what people want. So finding out the public interest is also that. This is why I brought this discussion.
Yeah, it's interesting to equate the public interest with accountability. I'm not sure I'm 100% in line with you on this one. I think that accountability, certainly in ICANN's remit, is seen as just being accountability in sort of several different ways, but altogether, I don't think that all parties on ICANN agree to ICANN being accountable and needing to be accountable. But I think that the different component parts of ICANN's community have a different view about what accountability is. So you can be accountable in saying, well, we are representing the interests of our users, of our people, of our registries, or customers, or whatever. But these interests might actually not be aligned with each other. And I would venture out actually to say that when one is representing the interest of a specific set of the population, so specific users, specific peoples, etc., one is actually representing vested interests, because those people have an interest in their point of view being pushed forward rather than the greater public good that is probably much harder to find because of the diversity of all the people out there. So that's a slightly different answer, I think, than what others might give you.
Thanks, Olivier. Yeah. Two different angles to the same issue, but do we have another question? I think we had one in the back. Okay, so we have some.
There's a question over there, Anupam.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. So what I understand now is that public interest for IGF, public interest for ISOC, and public interest for ICANN are three different types. So is there a common public interest on which all the three come together?
That's a good one for you.
I think I just said, I think there's many different views on that. If in ICANN they can't find what the public interest is, I'd be challenged to think that other organizations would also agree with whatever is found in ICANN. I think that the view outside of ICANN is that some of the actions that ICANN takes are not exactly aligned with the public interest. The view inside ICANN is that, from many inside ICANN, is that they are absolutely following the public interest because it's in the ICANN bylaws and it's in the articles of incorporation. When it comes down to ISOC, I don't know. I think the view, I would say, because it's less political in nature, it's probably easier to say, well, yes, we are acting in the public interest. But the moment you start involving commercial pressures and commercial interests in an equation, then there's always this trade-off: commercial interests, interest of the people. It's difficult, and especially when you look at a multi-stakeholder system, because you've got government, civil society, and private sector, and that's one of the challenges here. We all have a slightly different point of view. This is why a multi-stakeholder system works. But finding consensus on issues which are as fundamental as this, issues which have been discussed for centuries, and sometimes without an answer or a sort of a single answer, which are affected by cultural issues as well. We've heard from, if you look at Maslow's pyramid and the basis of it all being safety, being overarching over everything else. And if it impedes on my personal right to speak out in my free speech, but I'm safe, I'm happier to be safe and keep my mouth shut rather than die and open my mouth. It's a different thing, but it really depends culturally speaking as well, I think.
Yeah, it'd be naive not to acknowledge that power is a factor here. That we're all equal, but some are more equal than others. That what we have is influencers. Whether we are on the end user end of things. We're even though that we are the majority, but we don't have the power and influence and money behind us in order to influence a lot of the policy. And even though that ISOC is a 501c, it still has a commitment to go out there, by law, to go out there and fundraise. And remember I said, most of the 120,000 members, they don't pay for a membership. Only Germany and Canada are the only two chapters that have a $60 or €50 membership fee. That's minuscule in terms of, so the power interest in terms of the influencers, there's going to be, they have more access to their influencing organizational commitments.
Thanks. I would just add something very important to this this question, which is when you're talking about these organizations and public interest, the processes that lead to this discussion, what is in the public interest and so forth, it's very important to also address the issue of dissent, recognizing dissent and dealing with dissent. So one, public interest, the public, these are all concepts which are very absolute, and as Olivia put it very well, the discussion on the concept of public interest can be traced immemorially in time. So you had many reviews and discussions, what is this concept? So it's very hard to see this as a one-sided view. And sometimes the process of recognizing dissent can be even more challenging when you don't have that concept becomes modeled. What is the public interest? So that's all I wanted to add.
Can I? So in the wider internet governance world, there are other debates which are very similar to this debate which we're having. Not similar as to the topic itself, but with two different points of view, each of which is actually quite quite reasonable, I would say. One of them is freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is something that's very important, and yet one finds that on the internet you also have this right to free speech being used in order to spread hate speech, harassment, political motives, which are terrorist, etc. And you know what it's like, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. So how do you decide on one or the other? Is it in the public interest to have censorship? Is it in the public interest to shut down websites? Who decides on that? To block parts of the network? To filter content? Again, there's no single answer for that. The debate has been raging on for a long time. There's a cultural issue to it as well. In some countries, the United States, for example, there's an amendment to the Constitution which is a constitutional right to free speech. And when you think about some topics, very simple topic, Nazi discussions, so promoting Nazi ideas, free speech in the US, you can promote pretty much anything you want. But you speak about and you promote Nazi ideas in Germany, it's against the law. You will end up in jail or in deep trouble. So it's a complex thing, and maybe you have to let us know. Tell us what you think about these topics, because I think we've been discussing these for a long time. We haven't found any answer to it. But it'd be interesting to have a fresh outlook. So I'd be interested in hearing from any of you that have got an idea on these topics. Question one: Amazon. Should it go to Amazon.com? Should it remain and go to the Amazonian region? Question two: freedom of speech against censorship or blocking. Number three: filtering of content or total opening of any content that you can get. There's many such questions, so just a few to start you with.
Okay, thanks. Olivia, anyone would like to share their thoughts on these issues? And I also want to do a final round of comments and questions as well to our panelists.
Do you have an answer to any of these problems? You can join the working group, but
Sebastian promises he won't protest this time. It's in your public interest.
I was actually telling Glenn when Sebastian was saying I'm against this. I said, well, that's very French, isn't it? We want very much free speech in France. And the French, as you know, since the French Revolution, have prided themselves in not being aligned to any specific order. You're told to do something, you do the opposite. In fact, you vote for a president, and the day after the results have been given, the president has already lost some percentage points, and so it's very strange. But it's a French way of doing things.
I'll just
question your leaders.
I'll just note a little to complement what I said on the issue of multilingualism, for instance. I find it fantastic that India has so many languages and cultures, and I like, even like in one neighborhood, you can find so many different languages and cultures and temples and everything. This is amazing. This is great. And Brazil is more of a mess. I think we had lots of immigrations, but we kind of everything blended in a culture which has many different aspects, but we don't have this much difference together of cultures. And one of the things that I find interesting is, for example, when culture is pictured online, and one of the, for example, in this case, one of the offers, and I got contacted by someone from at large who said, but you can have .amazonas instead of .amazon, and this is a really good thing because it's really important, the name Amazonas. And we were like, okay, so that is an important name, but who speaks Portuguese in the world? So we started a meeting of the Lusophone community in IC, and we started, now there is an IGF for the Portuguese speakers community, and so when it is interesting to promote multilingualism, you get all these sorts of amazing offers. But when you are actually doing content online, when you're trying really to get your message across to the broader range of people, and really when you're trying to communicate in most places, you have to communicate in English, you have to adapt to a certain model, a certain culture. So this is one of the things that we say, wow, this is an amazing offer, but is this really in our interest? Is this really worth giving up the international sort of name for what we know as international communication for a linguistic approach? So as you see, there are many aspects to this issue. And another thing that I wanted to bring to you.
To close, I think the time.
Yes, we are out of time already, but as Glenn put it very well, there is Internet Governance Hub, there are the online communities. So do always bring in what is the aspect that you're interested to discuss, your concerns about internet governance and internet policy, to find out what others are saying. Then you will find out the true public interest, if there's any.
Thanks very much, Renata, Olivier, Sebastian, and Glenn for this very enlightening session. We do not have all the answers, but we are looking at the processes that will apply in this case, specifically the Amazon case, what happens in ICANN. Everybody's going to watch, I think.
That will be a real test case.
Yes.
It's going to be very interesting. It's I think one of the first cases that really has gone on for a very long time. There were previous cases like .vin and .wine, which just went on for a very long time as well. But this one is really one that involves two very different points of view, and based on even two different legal systems.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see which one prevails. And unfortunately, there's no middle-of-the-road solution,
right.
or at least at present, there might not be a middle-of-the-road solution. You never know if Amazon turns around and decides they were going to, I don't know, make an offer you can't refuse. Who knows?
Yeah, thanks very much. Real test of the multi-stakeholder model. So it's my privilege now to